And what's up, everybody? Welcome in. It is GC Live Tuesday episode of the show. I am Wes Mitchell, joined by our special guest today. It is my buddy Chris Paschal. He wears many hats. We're calling him Gamecock Central columnist. He also is an attorney at Goins Law Firm. Also has his own podcast, has his own website that he writes for as well, Front Porch Football. And Chris and I actually, our paths cross with many people, I've noticed, man, because our presenting sponsor here on the show is Clint Hammond, and I believe that Chris knows Clint. ClintHammond.com is how you can get more information on Clint, 803-771-6933. And before we came on, Chris, I was asking you if that was a BP Skinner suit, and you confirmed that 100% that was a Brent Skinner suit. Brent, not a sponsor, but we love Brent enough. We'll give him some love anyway, man. Looking very snazzy today, Chris. Appreciate you joining us, man.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. And both Clint and Brent, both great Gamecocks and residents of Columbia.
No doubt, man. There's the info for Clint right there. I'll give you a little bit more info on Clint later on. But again, if you're in the market for a new home, give Clint a shout. And if you want to refinance, he can walk you through that process as well. Chris going to join us here today to talk a little bit about the Gamecocks from his column. You never know what you're going to get. Some days he might be calling for somebody's head. The other days he might be going in on the Florida Gators. And today he makes his GC Live debut. Chris, dude, what did you think of, first and foremost, Dan Mullen's comments this week? The Gators have now canceled all media availability. I think they're going they're going into hideout right now, I think, and battening down the hatches. But here's my thing, man. Even if you feel that way, Florida's got so much negativity around the program right now anyway. Why would you open yourself up to such scrutiny this week?
No, I agree. And something that's interesting about Dan Mullen over the past couple years, is that he gets more defensive the more times that he should not be defensive, if that makes sense. So when you look at some of the things, I mean, he was going in, I guess, 2 years ago. I think it was the week after he had just gotten embarrassed in the screaming match over the Vanderbilt game with Derek Mason. He's coming in a costume dressed as Darth Vader. I feel like his instincts and what Gator Nation is wanting him to perform as and act like is just totally off course of what he's doing. You see with Urban Meyer, a guy who's a lot more business approach, loves to talk recruiting. Obviously can't get into specifics of recruits, but would love to talk about recruiting, X's and O's. Whereas Dan Mullen is almost deflective. Nobody wants to, or he doesn't want to talk about it, kind of his shortcomings. So it's one of those interesting things. It's almost like the more he should be trying to have good grace and try and give more information to the Gator faithful, he kind of backs his self up to the door. So.
Yeah, and for those who are just joining us, Chris writes a weekly column on GamecockCentral.com. It is called The Verdict. This week in The Verdict, Chris, you were discussing this matchup in particular, South Carolina against Florida. And, the two teams came into this season with very different expectations. Florida right now, a 4-4 football team. And, I think you made the point. You think the Gamecock fans are unhappy right now. Just take a slight little just walk over to Gator Twitter or to the Gator message boards, and you'll see a fan base that's really ticked off right now, man. So what's your perspective on this Florida team and maybe how they come into this game? I know the title of The Verdict this week is that basically we're going to know pretty early in this game how it's probably going to play out.
Yeah, I mean, you watched Carolina last season, and when it became clear that the season was not only over, but that coaching staff had kind of concluded its time in Columbia. I feel like you saw a lot of questionable play, maybe questionable efforts in terms of how Carolina finished out last season. Same thing I'm starting to pick up from not only Gator Twitter, but some of the guys that really follow that program, David Waiters being one of them. With Gator Breakdown, I mentioned in the post, he was saying, I don't know how mentally strong this team is right now. I don't know if this is a team that is going to show up in Columbia when it's cold out. against a team that hopefully has a lot more fight than what we're going to be kind of putting on the field earlier in the game. So I think there's definitely a chance that if you can land a couple of haymakers, if you can get a kickoff return for a touchdown, get a huge sack, interception, something along those lines, you might be able to put Florida on the ropes and really kind of get them to the point where they don't want to be there anymore. I mentioned in the beginning portions of the verdict, one of the things that Florida fans and Gator players love to talk about is in all kinds of weather. They'll show up in all kinds of weather, whether it's raining, whether it's hot, whether it's cold. And I don't know if we're going to see that after the month of October that Florida had, losing to Kentucky, losing to LSU, and then obviously getting curb stomped against Georgia. So I think we're going to see pretty early on whether there is some resolve, whether there is some fight with this Florida team.
Yeah, the funny thing is, Chris, it's not like the Gators have been awful under Mullen. They played for an SEC championship last year, but it just shows you again how quickly it can turn. But their record against Power 5 schools, and I can't remember the exact number, so I'm not going to throw it out there, but their last 10, 11, 12 games against Power 5 schools, the record is awful. So I think it just goes to show you unless you're winning national titles, and even that doesn't necessarily buy you just years and years of goodwill. What's that?
Ed Orgeron.
Yeah, exactly. If you're in one of these sort of premier programs where they have, let's be honest, somewhat insane expectations, if you're not matching them, they're gonna go after you pretty quickly, and we're seeing that with Florida right now. But I like your point, man, about Mullins, just his personality. Just like I think Ed O has some things, maybe some off the field stuff is hurting him. I think Dan Mullen's personality, if he was a likable guy, would this be a little bit different vibe from the fan base? Maybe not, but you'd probably at least have a few more people coming to your aid.
Well, something that I think it was David Waiters again, but I might be wrong on that. Something that he posted on Twitter earlier today is that the Dan Mullen that got off the plane back in early 2018 or maybe late 2017, whenever that hire was officially made, but the guy that got off that plane is a lot different from the guy that they have currently in Gainesville right now. Back 2018 in that inaugural season for Dan Mullen, he's talking about wanting to compete, whether it's on the football field or in a thumb wrestling contest. Now all of a sudden it's, I don't want to talk about recruiting until it's recruiting season. I don't want to blame other guys who are making mistakes, but then constantly referencing the defensive staff and their shortcomings. So I feel like the fight in Dan Mullen has definitely kind of changed over the past few years, something that we've seen for multiple coaches in Gainesville as time goes on. So I don't know what this weekend is going to look like, and I try to make that clear in my post this week. But something that I think could potentially happen is if Dan Mullen's able to get a rallying of it's us against the world, let's fight, let's get to an 8-win season, let's be a contender, be a fighter. You might be able to see Florida put up some big numbers against Carolina, but I just have my doubts that this team is in that mindset right now. I think it's more of a let's just get the season over with and hopefully we can move on into 2022.
Well, and you referenced that article with The Athletic, man. I mean, there is not a 4-letter word that is worse to call a football team than soft. So, if people start throwing around the word soft about your football team, that's those are fighting words. Like we'll see. Like I agree, man. It could go one way or the other as far as how they respond to what's going on outside their doors. We don't know what's going on inside their doors, but dude, I mean, on paper, Florida 18, 20, they're almost a 3-touchdown favorite. On paper, right. Florida absolutely should beat South Carolina, but this is sort of that outside element that doesn't necessarily come down to necessarily talent that, like you said, man, I agree. It could go completely one way or the other, depending on if they're able to rally the troops or not. Hey, put on your fan hat here, fan only hat, not analyzing, nothing like that. Would you be more excited going to the game if you knew you were going to get a look at Jason Brown or not necessarily?
I would be more excited. Well, to answer your question, I don't think that would really change my excitement level. I would be more excited if going into the game you heard something, and obviously he's not going to say this, even if it is true. But if you heard something along the lines of these guys that we've heard for years now in recruiting, Marshawn Lloyd, Jordan Burch, man, he had an amazing practice. I think he's really going to come onto the team. We're going to start him at running back. We're going to start him at defensive end, whatever the case may be. Quarterback, I mean, Jason Brown is a guy that put up great numbers in the spring game and obviously had a great conclusion to the A&M game. So I think I would be excited to hear that he was starting, but I think it really isn't even coming down to who the signal caller is. It's why haven't we been able to put our best playmakers in positions to make plays, especially obviously on the offensive side of the ball and with the running backs. So I would be more excited to hear, all right, this is a week that we're going to heavily feature Jaheim Bell, Juju McDowell, Marshawn Lloyd, these types of guys. But if Jason Brown's the one that can get the ball to him, then obviously that will get me fired up.
Yeah, I think you and a lot of Gamecock fans would be just much more fired up to just go watch an offense that just went up and down the field on this struggling Todd Grantham defense. No matter who was behind center, no matter who's catching the football, no matter who's running it, I've noticed fans have reached like the point of the year where they're saying, well, he's saying the same things. And we're at the point, what else is a coach going to say in the press conferences? Like it kind of is what it is. I know you got to get out of here, man. Any final thoughts? I don't know if you got to listen or watch Beamer speak today or not, but
just saw the opening statement where he said Jalen Brooks is still out. And obviously I think a huge blow, even with the poor performance of the offensive line. I hated hearing Dylan Wanham is questionable, which makes it sound like he's probably definitely out. So hated to hear that as well.
Yeah. And any final thoughts on this game, on this matchup?
I'll be there. I'll be bundled up. Hopefully it will be a 4-quarter game and fans can stay in this stadium for a long time. But yeah, if I'm the offense coordinator, if I'm this offensive staff, first 2 drives I think are critical in defining how this game is going to go. So empty the playbook.
Chris, we appreciate it, man. Congrats on your GC Live debut. Appreciate you taking the time, and everybody else out there, go check out The Verdict. It is up on GamecockCentral.com right now on the front page and on the Insider Forum. Appreciate it, man. Have a good one, okay?
Appreciate it, Wes. Talk to you.
Yep. Chris Paschal, Goins Law Firm. Appreciate him. Good stuff. Making his GC Live debut. Again, I'm solo today. Probably a little bit shorter show, to be honest, unless y'all have a bunch of questions. If y'all have a bunch of questions, we'll get into them. I did see a question a second ago I'm going to go get to. But first, got to tell y'all a little bit more about my buddy Clint Hammond. His NMLS number is 71597. You can reach Clint, the letter C, Hammond at mortgagenetwork.com is his email address. Several other phone numbers there, 803-576-4450, 803-422-6797 as well. Clint, the presenting sponsor right here on GC Live. So Beamer talking today, and I'll be honest, I was writing up the report on the quarterback, so I missed probably the final 15 minutes of the presser, final 10 minutes of the presser, whatever maybe the final half, final third was, but not a ton new, not a ton that we didn't expect. So injury report, Dylan Wanham out more than likely, questionable to be completely accurate. Jalen Dickerson is doubtful. So Wanham questionable, Dickerson doubtful. Zeb Nolan still up in the air. Here's Beamer's quote. He said, he and Jason both, and Colton and Connor, all the quarterbacks, they need to practice well and compete and show that they're the best person for the job on Saturday night. From just a health standpoint with Zeb, again, this is Beamer talking, I think the biggest thing is just the mobility. I mean, he can sit in the pocket and throw. He did that today, but there's a difference between that and then being able to get flushed out of the pocket, or you've got to scramble, or you've got to go run. How effective he would be on his knee. He goes on to say that he is making progress, but he needs to continue to make progress Beamer says, quote, for us, to me, he needs to be able to do more in practice tomorrow than he did today. Today was good, but just keep taking steps throughout the week of practice. So basically, if you read into that, for there to be any chance Zeb Nolan is going to start, then essentially he's going to have to do a good bit more in practice tomorrow than he did today. And, that's something we've been saying pretty much for the last week, is that by Wednesday or so, you have Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Those are your main practices going into an opponent. And so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, if you don't get your quarterback back in there for Wednesday's practice, your chances of that guy playing and playing well, are pretty low. So that's why Wednesday for them is going to be so important, because that would give you 2 days. That said, I've said this since last week. I really think that this is heading towards a Jason Brown start. Jason Brown got first team reps last week. Jason Brown got first team reps this week so far. He got first team reps today as we record this and go live on Tuesday. So to me, that's the way we're headed. Now, does Jason Brown need to finish this thing out? I said this yesterday. There was a game last year. There's a game last year when South Carolina opened up their QB competition going into the Ole Miss game. And everything looked like Ryan Hilinski early in that week was going to get a chance to go start. Well, as the week went on, he did not practice well. And they were left no choice but to not start Hilinski. So, I think you look and, this was a deal where the fans, of course, got upset. Colin Hill started again, but the other guys in the competition didn't necessarily, from what I was told at the time, live up to their side of getting themselves that opportunity. So to me, if you look, and it all sets up for Jason Brown to start on Saturday, but he's got to finish it out. He's got to practice well Wednesday. He's got to practice well Thursday. But again, so there's a question on here. I'm going to hit y'all's questions now. Nikki on Facebook says, actually, Nikki, I'll come back to you. There was a quarterback question. Who asked it? Shane, who would you start at quarterback? I would go Jason Brown. I think the mobility that he's going to be able to provide you, especially considering that Nolan, not the most mobile guy in the first place, will be coming off the knee injury. To me, some quarterback talk is not necessarily coach speak, but maybe a little bit of gamesmanship. And at this point in the season, you've not really gotten to see what Jason Brown can do as a starter. You've not gotten to see what he can do in a situation where he can go into the game as the guy with a game plan, matched around him and around his skill set. And, there's a reason Jason Brown did not start the year. So I'm not sitting here saying he should have been playing before, or that he necessarily, I'm not saying he hasn't gotten a fair shot. I think he has improved. And I think it just makes sense at this point with Doty out, with Nolan banged up. As I've said, really the last week or so, if you're going to give Jason Brown a shot, this is the time to do it. This is a Florida defense that is going to really try to get after the quarterback. Ty Grantham, known for his blitzing, known for his pass rush, known for doing exotic things on third down. South Carolina obviously has struggled in pass pro. So for me, having that little added element of a guy who can move around, a guy who can run around, can extend plays, can get the football down the field, is certainly something South Carolina is going to need if they're going to have any chance to go win this game. Now, the big question for Brown and for South Carolina is that you have to be able to minimize the mistakes. And by that, we mean minimize the turnovers, because that's been an issue dating back to preseason. That's been an issue in practice. And it was part of the reason that Brown was not really necessarily in the running to be the starter right off the bat. Let's see. Let me hit on a couple more of y'all's questions. Let's see. Jamie says, I don't think he's going to announce a starter. Make Florida prepare for both. I agree with that 100%. I think you just wait. Let's see. Randy says, if Brown starts, do you start Jenkins with him? I mean, not necessarily. I think that goes back to to Jenkins himself. I don't think you can tie two players together and say, well, if one starts, you start the other. That's not necessarily fair to the guys that are also at the receiver position. So, I think if you are in a situation where Jenkins is pushing for playing time, which I mean, it seems like he is, then yes, you want to get Jenkins in there. But do you start him just because Jason Brown is the quarterback? Probably not. Bo wants to know what's holding Amari and Brown back. I really don't. I don't know. He's a guy I had pretty high expectations for as he came in. He's a guy that, what was a deep ball threat. He actually. I mentioned this last week. Amarian played a pretty. He played a bit more against A&M, and while he's been in the slot for most of the year, they had moved Amarian out to the outside spot as well. So I think they were making a more concerted effort to get him the football, to get him on the field, to maybe use him to stretch the field. But guys, it's hard for these receivers to get going when the offense just has not been able to stay on the field for a long period of time. Like you're not going to be able to spread the football around to multiple different receivers if you're not able to make first down, stay on the field. There's been some games, I guess, they've been able to do that, but certainly, against a team like Texas A&M last week, where again, you go back to the 6 yards in the first first almost 3 quarters, I should say. I mean, if you're not on the field, you're not making first downs. Nobody's going to get the football. Nobody's going to have a big night. That said, would I have pictured Amari and Brown being a bigger part of this offense as far as production and being a guy who would have played a lot more and caught a lot more passes when South Carolina landed him? Absolutely. He was the guy when they signed him, when they landed him, that they were sort of hoping could play Shi Smith's role, could be that slot guy who could do a lot of things underneath, could run the slot fades, could make people miss, could create big plays, and really would be a matchup nightmare in one-on-one coverage. That not necessarily that he was going to be quite to the level of Shi necessarily, but that was the skill set that I think they recruited him as. So the fact that he hasn't really gotten the football a lot, yes, has surprised me quite a bit. Nikki wants to know if South Carolina should load the box and dare Florida to throw the football. Nikki, I think they're going to have to do that. I think the question is, if South Carolina loads the box, are they able to then stop the run? Are they able to slow the run? This is a Florida football team that is very successful running the football. And I have not looked at the most updated stats. I'm going to try to pull that right now. But going into last week, I was doing some doing some bye week, early prep on Florida and what to expect from them. To be honest, I had not watched Florida a ton this year. I watched some of the Florida-Georgia game, and I started reading up on them. And here's the thing. They are outstanding in the running game. And even having played Georgia, who we all know is they've got to statistically be the best run defense in the SEC, and they are. Georgia's only averaging 75.6 rushing yards per game allowed. So even though now you can factor in the fact that Florida has played that Georgia defense, Florida third in the conference in rushing offense, 243 yards per game on the ground. Even more impressive is that they're averaging basically 6.1 yards per carry this year with 18 rushing touchdowns. They rush the football 40 times per game. That's top 4 in the conference as well. Again, top 3 in overall rushing yards per game and number 1 in the conference in yards per carry. So I don't know. I mean, that to me, when you look at this matchup, when you look at South Carolina, when you look at what they do, that's a concern. That is a huge concern. Let's see. By the way, this kind of caught me off guard a little bit. Florida, this is one of those questions I would normally throw at Chris Clark. Chris will be back tomorrow, by the way. I was off. I thought he was going to be back today. He'll be back tomorrow. He'll be back in the saddle tomorrow. Who do y'all think? You can't look it up. Don't look it up. Who is first in the SEC in rushing offense? Rushing yards per game. Y'all throw it in the chat. I'll tell you in a second, obviously. If you're listening to the podcast, I'll give you the answer. But it caught me off guard a little bit. There's 2 teams ahead of Florida that have very, very similar numbers. But the top team actually surprised me a little bit. Let's see. We had another question. I'm going to go back to that real quick. Shane wants to know, do you think the game will go according to if our defense comes to play? Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to put it, Shane. But, I think the question offensively is can they give you something? Can the offense give the defense a chance? And then the question becomes, does the defense come to play? You've gotten an extra week to look at Florida. You've got an extra week to look at tendencies. That said, this is a Florida team that runs the football and they run their quarterback. I think they run the quarterback. I heard this during the broadcast of Florida and Georgia. Going into that week, they run the quarterback more than anybody else in the SEC as far as QB run game. So what does that do? That creates an extra gap. That's an extra blocker up front, essentially, is what that means, that you as a defense have to account for. So you almost are going to have an extra defender in the box regardless. So to me, that's scary for South Carolina, because even without having the QB run game to have to take account for, South Carolina has not been great slowing down the run in SEC play. Has the defense as a whole probably overachieved? In my opinion, yes. But in this particular matchup, is that just a huge concern, huge red flag? Yes, as well. Now, on the other side, I'll look at the South Carolina offense. This is a Florida defense that has struggled a bit. To me, guys, they've got to stay out of third and long. And that's easier said than done. That's been the case all season long. This is a Florida defense that will play 2 high safeties on you on first and second down. They won't necessarily always have that extra guy in the box. They'll give you some opportunities if you can block them up front. If you can block their 6 guys in the box, you can run the football against these guys. Now, we'll see if South Carolina can do that, but schematically, they will give you some of those opportunities. Now, the problem with facing a Todd Grantham defense, and obviously, he's sort of in his job is in jeopardy right now. It seems like they're probably about to push him out. So that said, the problem with playing a Grantham defense is that if you let them get into 3rd and 8 or longer, that's when he draws up all of his exotic stuff. That's when he's going to come after you. That's when he's going to sort of put you in a position where he's going to go get your quarterback. And it's going to be a lot of different ways, a lot of different looks that you haven't necessarily seen. We've seen South Carolina have issues picking up rushers. So it's just not a good matchup from that standpoint either. Greg says, quit running up the middle on every first down. I mean, that's an oversimplification, Greg. I mean, do they run the football up the middle some on first down? Yes, but good. I mean, no matter what they did on first down against A&M, it was absolutely a struggle. As Foster points out on YouTube, Florida had the most rushing yards on Georgia with 161. I think Beamer said today it was the most rushing yards or most total yards. I can't remember which. Most rushing yards, I think, on them since basically since the 2019, I think. John says, since you won't answer my question, I missed your question, John. If you re-ask it, I will try to get to it. I'm flying solo, so I'm maybe have not seen all the questions. But yes, to answer the question from earlier, Travis and Jamie nailed it. Ole Miss and that high-flying Kiffin offense, they are actually leading the SEC in rushing yards per game with just under 250. Second in the conference, impressively, is Arkansas with 249 per game, and then Florida with 243 per game. You average up there. And Tennessee fourth, Auburn fifth, Georgia sixth, South Carolina 12th, unfortunately. Last in the conference, as you would expect. Actually, these stats are bookended by Mississippi teams. Mississippi at the top of the league in rushing, Mississippi State at the bottom of the league in rushing. Some of that just because they run the air raid and they don't run the football a ton. They run the football less as far as attempts than anyone else, but also just that they're not good at running the football. Mississippi State 2.57 yards per carry. Not good. All right. Your other question, John, was would you put Juju in the Wildcat package? No, not necessarily. I mean, I think that's something you could look at. To me, if I'm direct snapping to someone, I'm snapping to Jaheim Bell. That's the guy. If there's one guy that I'm going to put in the Wildcat and say, I want this guy to see the football more on short yardage, to me, it's Jaheim. I mean, I loved when they handed Jaheim the football as the up back. It's kind of a fullback. And to me, anytime they get the football to Jaheim Bell, it seems like good things happen. So that would be my thought process. You know, if anything, I want to see some of these other backs finally get a rhythm and get some room and kind of I don't know. It just feels like the running backs have not found a rhythm all year long. Now, whether that's because of the blocking up front or the scheme or what, who knows? But I'm not convinced that Juju. Like I think there's a conversation to be had with all those running backs. Who's the best running back on this team? I don't know the answer. I think there's a case to be made with what we saw this past week for Zaquandre to get the ball more. I think we saw signs. I keep seeing little flashes that Marshawn Lloyd is getting back to his old self. Now that said, we haven't seen him break out yet with that big game, but I keep seeing these little flashes where I feel like the explosiveness has taken a step forward. Then we've all seen what Juju can do at times, and we all saw what Kevin Harris can do last year. So, as Randy says, each running back has his own skill set. It's hard to say who is the best. I agree. So then I think it comes down to matchups that particular week. It comes down to what plays you're going to be calling on that drive or that set of plays back to back to back when that guy's on the field. It comes down to who is the most healthy at that certain time in the season. We all know your running backs will get banged up. But point being, I think no matter what the reasons are, the running back, not one running back out of the group has been able to just really get going and get in the groove and prove that he's the guy. Like I feel like if we did a poll, it'd be interesting to see who voted, and you could do 1, 2, 3, 4. It'd be interesting to see what order the average was for those four guys. And Juju is good. Don't get me wrong. If you look at the PFF stats, he's not really better or worse than the other three. I do think the thing with Juju is you're sacrificing some power and some size when he is in the game. To me, he is the guy you want to the football on the perimeter. Slot. They've been using him in the slot a little bit. They've been using him on the swing passes, outside zone. To me, those are where you need to get him the football. Running the football with Juju up the middle against A&M, that's not really, in my opinion, a great recipe for success when you have guys like Kevin Harris, although he was banged up against A&M, I think, going into that game. We have Zaquandre White, and of course Marshawn Lloyd, who I thought Marshawn showed some physicality as he powered into the end zone against A&M as well. Ryan says, with the fast, athletic running backs we have, I don't understand why they don't run more vertical or crossing routes instead of swing routes or checkdowns. Zaquandre is a guy that I think can really help the team in the passing game. I think that's an added element that he gives you. Not that the other guys can't. Juju certainly has proved he can, but he just seems to bring a little bit more in the passing game when Zaquandre is on the field. Fred asked, do you feel at least one of the running backs will transfer at the end of the season? I don't know. I mean, I think anytime in this day and age that you have kind of a crowded room and it's not clear necessarily what the pecking order is at that position, then that's always going to be a possibility. Always going to be a possibility. So we'll see. That's certainly something that we'll be tracking. Let's see. There's a question from Jamie I missed earlier. We see more Debo and more Mo at Debo Williams and Mo Kaba, of course, at linebacker. Yeah, I think so. Mo Kaba checked into the game. I went back and looked. Mo checked into the game the beginning of the second quarter last week. Debo still didn't go in until late in the game. That was like fourth quarter. Darrell Williams was actually the next linebacker on the field. So sorry, I had to read the text real quick. But so yeah, we'll see. Darrell Williams could play more. Mo could play more. Debo was on brand. Like when he came in, he was running around, he was busting heads, he was getting after people. I think Debo is still just sort of learning this scheme and getting comfortable out there. But from a physicality standpoint, the way this dude plays, very, very impressive. I'm a huge Debo Williams fan on and off the field. I think he's got a bright future at South Carolina and is a kid that I for one hope we see more of down the stretch, because that means he's gotten to a point of comfortability where he can go out there and make plays while still playing within the scheme and not getting out of his gaps, not getting wild, and sort of just going to the football. This show is, of course, also brought to you by our good friends at Dead Soxy. Go check out Dead Soxy, deadsoxy.com. Use the code COCKY to get 25% off your order. Again, that's the code COCKY to get 25% off your order and get some outstanding socks from our friends at Dead Soxy, one of our three main sponsors here on GC Live. The other, of course, Primal Gourmet. Go to primalgourmetsc.com and see if I can find y'all a code on that one as well. Chris and I get meals from Primal Gourmet every single week now. If you're in the market to have some meal prep done and not have to worry about that each week, especially if those dudes out there who are trying to lose some weight, or if you're single and you don't like to cook, or if you and your wife are just busy, check out primalgourmetsc.com. Use the code GCOCK20 for a discount on your first order. But these are chef prepared meal plans that you can have delivered or pick up every single week. Really, it's an awesome deal. And Chris and I have been eating them, I would say, the last 3 or 4 weeks. So it's been pretty awesome. All right, y'all, let me see if y'all have any final questions, and I'm going to get out of here. Let's see. I don't see any more. All right, y'all. Appreciate y'all joining. Appreciate all of our sponsors. Appreciate all of you supporting. Appreciate y'all hanging in there with me as I've been sort of flying solo. Appreciate Chris Paschal joining me as a guest at the beginning of the show. And hey, let's close out the week positively, get into Wednesday, and then we will be back on here with Chris on Wednesday. Then we'll have Thursday, Friday as well, and then we'll all check the game out on Saturday. All right, y'all. Appreciate it. Have a good one.